My mother turned my bank account into her personal money laundering scheme, and when I finally said no, she lost her mind. What started as a harmless favor spiraled into financial manipulation, emotional blackmail, and a shady plan she'd been hiding for years. By the time I tried to escape, she wasn't acting like my mother anymore. She was someone willing to destroy me just to keep her secret safe. When my mother first asked if she could have her salary paid into my bank account, I didn't think twice. It wasn't some elaborate plan or secretive scheme, it was just easier. She wasn't tech savvy. Honestly, not tech savvy was being generous. The woman still used a flip phone with a cracked screen and couldn't tell the difference between a Google Doc and a PDF. So when she got this job that required her to upload her payslips monthly as part of her housing allowance documentation, I stepped in to help. It felt like the natural thing to do. I saw the payslips myself every month without fail. I helped her log into her housing account, upload the documents, and navigate whatever digital labyrinth the system required. She worked legally. Her job was legitimate. Her income was steady. And when she asked to have it deposited into my bank account, she framed it as a convenience. Why go through the hassle of opening a new account? She reasoned, when we already have this system working. And I agreed. At the time, it even helped me since she frequently borrowed money from me, often on a weekly basis. It was simpler to just deduct what she owed before handing over the rest in cash. It wasn't just convenience either. Somewhere deep down, I think I still wanted her approval. I still craved those small, rare moments when she expressed gratitude or looked at me like I was more than a burden or an obligation. We had a complicated relationship, to say the least, but I'd learned to find value in tiny scraps of appreciation, even when they were doled out sparingly. The truth is, I didn't grow up expecting her to act like a mother. She was impulsive, erratic, prone to guilt tripping and playing the victim when things didn't go her way. Still, I'd always been the stable one, the one who picked up the pieces, handled the forms, made the phone calls, managed the crises. It wasn't love in the traditional sense. It was more like obligation baked into routine, and it made me feel like I had some kind of control in the chaos of our family. That chaos, by the way, wasn't limited to her. My sister and her father, my mother's ex, had their own mess. Both my mom and sister had a long history of poor financial decisions. Frivolous spending, late payments, ignoring consequences. My sister in particular had taken things too far. Years ago, I opened both civil and criminal cases against her and her father for identity theft. Imagine waking up and realizing that your own family has used your name for their scams. That was my reality. But like most things in my family, the drama didn't reach a resolution, so much as it fizzled out into uneasy compromise. We reached an agreement, I dropped the charges, and life moved on. Until a few years later, their accountant of all people reported them for tax evasion. It was always just a matter of time. Despite all this, I let myself fall back into the habit of managing things for my mom. I told myself it was temporary. After all, I was only living with her again because I had nowhere else to go. My breakup had left me emotionally drained and financially unstable. My ex had been unemployed for nearly 7 months, and when it all fell apart, I was left with more debt than dignity. I couldn't afford a lease, especially not on a temp contract that might not be renewed, and the rent my mother offered was objectively cheaper than anywhere else I could find. It wasn't ideal, far from it. I'd been low contact with my mother for years before this, and completely no contact with my sister. But desperation doesn't always leave room for pride. I moved back in. I swallowed my discomfort. I told myself it was just until I could save up and stabilize my career. And for a while, I managed. The arrangement with a bank account worked. The money came in, I took what she owed me, handed her the rest, helped with her forms, and tried not to look too closely at the moral gray areas we were both tiptoeing around. She was getting by, I was getting by, and maybe that was enough. But even then, I should have known it wouldn't last. It all started with a conversation that at the time felt casual, harmless, even. My boyfriend and I were having dinner on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of night when the streetlights glow soft through the windows and everything feels calm. I'd just gotten off a long Zoom call and was venting about how tired I was from juggling my job, school, and the constant babysitting, financial, not literal, I did for my mother. She had me upload her payslips again today, I said, poking at my reheated pasta, still getting her salary paid into my account. It's honestly just easier that way. He blinked. Wait, your account? I nodded. Yeah, saves her from having to deal with her bank. Plus, I just subtract what she owes me before handing her the rest in cash. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me for a second too long. What? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. That could be a problem, he said slowly. You're basically receiving someone else's income. Doesn't that make it look like undeclared money? The words hit me like a slap. I blinked, then laughed it off. I mean, she works legally. I've seen her pay slips. There's nothing shady going on. Maybe not intentionally, he said. But if you're planning to apply for a mortgage soon, and we are, you should be careful. That could raise some serious red flags. I wanted to argue, defend myself, defend her. But something in my gut twisted, and I stayed quiet. Later that week, he talked to his accountant, just to be sure. When he came back with confirmation that yes, even innocent-looking deposits could be misinterpreted as undeclared income, I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Suddenly, this thing I'd brushed off as just a convenience felt like a ticking time bomb. So I did what I should have done from the start. I told my mother she needed to stop. At first, she didn't react. She just looked at me with this blank expression as though I'd asked her to give up her right arm. Then came the dramatics. Well, that's just great, she huffed. How are we supposed to pay the bills now? I explained calmly that she still had her income. It just needed to go into her own account. I even offered to help her open a new one, walk her through the setup, everything. I'd already done the math. Between the rent she collected from me, my sister, and my sister's boyfriend, her expenses, rent, utilities, council tax were fully covered. Her income wasn't even necessary to keep the household afloat, but logic didn't matter to her. Only control. You're abandoning me, she said the next morning after ignoring me all night. You're leaving me to starve. I had to fight the urge to laugh, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer disbelief. It was textbook emotional manipulation, and I recognized it instantly, but recognition didn't make it easier to hear. She sulked for days, guilt-tripped me about groceries, moaned loudly when opening bills just to make sure I could hear, made exaggerated sighs when calculating rent, muttering under her breath about selfish children and how everything falls on her. It didn't stop there. A few days later, she asked if I could help her open an international bank account, one she swore wouldn't report anything to the government. I stared at her stunned. That's not how it works, I said. They don't track foreign banks the same way she insisted. It'll be better, cleaner. You know, I didn't know. And more importantly, I didn't want to know. This wasn't about convenience anymore. This was about avoidance, about evasion, about hiding. When I asked why she didn't just ask my sister for help, her response made my blood run cold. Well, her accounts are still being monitored because of her dad's thing. Right? Her dad. The same man I filed charges against years ago for identity theft. The same charges I dropped after being practically begged to settle it privately, and now they were under government scrutiny anyway, thanks to their accountant. Suddenly, I saw everything with new eyes. This wasn't just my mother being forgetful or lazy or old-fashioned. This was her using me as a buffer, a shield, so she could keep her name out of the system. I felt sick. I thought about the mortgage. I wanted the future. I was trying to build the years I'd spent, untangling myself from the messes my family left behind, and now unknowingly, I'd walked right into another one. I didn't yell at her. I didn't make a scene. I just looked her in the eye and said, no, no, to the international bank. No, to using my account. Again. No, to being dragged into her chaos, no matter how long I'd been part of it. She cried, told me I was cold, said I didn't care if she ended up on the street. I knew those lines by heart. They were her greatest hits, played every time she didn't get what she wanted. But this time, I didn't flinch. I should have never moved back in. It's a thought I have at least once a day. Usually when I'm lying in bed at night, too exhausted to think straight, but too wound up to sleep, I repeat it to myself like a mantra. You should have never moved back in. You knew who they were. You knew what they were capable of. You knew better. But knowing better doesn't always mean you have better options. And after the breakup with my ex, who spent 7 out of 12 months unemployed and left me with a mountain of debt and nothing but radio silence, it felt like I had nowhere else to go. I didn't want to sign a lease in a city I might have to leave if my temp contract wasn't renewed. I couldn't crash with friends. Most of them lived far away or didn't have the space. My boyfriend's place was too soon, too complicated. And then my mother made the offer, move back in. Rent would be cheap. No lease. Temporary, she said. Just until I got back on my feet. I should have known temporary would stretch like it always did. Before moving in, I had been low contact with my mom for about 3 years. My sister. No contact entirely. That wasn't a choice I made lightly. My sister had crossed a line that no family member ever should. She'd used my identity. Not once, repeatedly. Credit cards, medical appointments, even a tax return. She and her father, my mom's ex, had no shame. I was in my early 20s when I found out my credit was in shambles. I couldn't get approved for a loan or a basic apartment. I had to fight tooth and nail just to get the fraud recognized. And when I did, I filed charges, civil and criminal, full-on legal war. It wasn't out of spite. It was survival. But even then, even after everything, my mother begged me to drop it. She cried, said it would destroy the family, said I was ruining everything. And, like an idiot, or maybe just a tired, broken daughter, I agreed to a private settlement and dropped the charges. I don't regret protecting myself, but I regret not finishing what I started. Because a few years later, karma caught up in the form of a disgruntled accountant who reported them both to the government. Suddenly, their finances were under a microscope, audits, fines, legal scrutiny. The whole mess unraveled on its own, just without my help. So, when my mother asked why she couldn't use my sister's bank account and casually mentioned it was being monitored, I wasn't shocked, I was numb. I'd spent so long numbing myself to this family's brand of dysfunction that by the time it came up again, it barely registered. They always had a way of pulling you back in, of making you feel like you owed them something. Money, time, silence. I never wanted to be back in this house. I never wanted to play financial chaperone again. But desperate circumstances have a way of shrinking your choices. And I'd told myself that I was strong enough now, that I had boundaries, that I knew how to say no. I did say no, but it didn't stop the guilt. My mother has a special talent for playing the martyr. When I told her I wouldn't be her financial filter anymore, she didn't yell. She sighed. She cried quietly in the kitchen. She left notes on the fridge reminding me of her sacrifices. Little digs. Can't even rely on my own daughter, tucked into casual conversations. And it worked in small ways. I'd find myself apologizing for being busy, for staying the weekend with my boyfriend, for not offering to cover her share of groceries. I didn't even notice it happening at first. That's how manipulation works. It's slow, quiet, disguised as care. I'd return from my boyfriend's place on Sunday night to a cold house and colder silences. My bedroom door would be shut, and the thermostat mysteriously turned off. My laundry left unfolded. Petty things, but deliberate. I was back in the same patterns I'd spent years escaping. Even though I paid rent, even though I cooked half the meals, even though I kept the house cleaner than she ever did, none of that mattered. She didn't want a tenant. She wanted control. And the truth is, part of me always feared she'd use my past against me. That one day, she'd throw it all in my face that I had once called the police on her, that I was the reason she had a criminal record. It's a story no one talks about now, but one we all remember. I was 17. She'd slapped me during an argument and left a mark. It wasn't the first time I'd had enough. I called the police. When they came, she screamed like she was being dragged to the gallows. My own daughter, she shrieked. She wants me arrested. She spent one night in jail. That was enough to haunt her. She never forgave me. She still brings it up passive-aggressively sometimes, jokingly, but always with an edge. You always had a flair for drama, she once said over dinner, even got me locked up like some criminal. I just kept chewing silently, counting the days until I could leave. Now I spend my weekends in my boyfriend's city. It's a 2-hour train ride, and honestly, I'd travel twice as far, just for the peace. I work in office during the week and live for the weekends when I can breathe. I've started seeing a therapist, an incredible woman who reminds me weekly that I'm not crazy, that I'm not selfish, that I'm allowed to have boundaries. The plan is simple: endure, save, find a permanent position, move, cut contact. This house isn't a home, it's a holding pattern. But every day that I stay here, the air gets heavier. It's strange how quickly you adapt when you're in survival mode. I've always thought of myself as a practical person, someone who works hard, plans ahead, keeps her emotions on a short leash. But being back in this house has shown me how much I rely on strategy to stay sane. Every interaction with my mother is calculated, every conversation rehearsed, every excuse finely tuned, so she doesn't sniff out what I'm really doing, preparing to leave for good. Some days, I feel like I'm living a double life. During the week, I'm the helpful daughter. I do what I need to maintain the peace, quietly, pay rent, cook dinner once in a while, nod along when she talks about how hard things are. I act just engaged enough to avoid suspicion, but never so involved that she thinks I'm staying long-term. I've perfected a neutral smile, one that says, I'm here without promising more than that. And then come the weekends, my small slice of freedom. I pack my bag every Friday and board the train to my boyfriend's flat, a cozy little place 2 hours away that feels like stepping into a different life. We make pancakes in the mornings, watch movies without pausing for background arguments. I sleep through the night without worrying if someone's going to bang on my door asking for money or shouting about some crisis that isn't mine. It's in those quiet moments, curled up on his couch, sipping coffee and looking at job listings, that I remember what life could be like, what it will be like once I get out. The plan is to secure a permanent position at my current company. I've been putting in extra hours, showing up early, volunteering for projects no one wants. I need them to see me as essential. A temp contract won't cut it for the kind of lease I want or the kind of life I want. If I can lock in that offer, I'll have enough security to move forward. Financially, I've been ruthless. Every time my paycheck lands, I split it immediately, essential savings emergency fund. My boyfriend doesn't know it yet, but I've even set aside a starting over account for when we eventually move in together. He's supportive more than I ever expected, but I don't want to show up empty-handed. I want to feel like I'm bringing something to the table other than trauma and emotional baggage. It's exhausting. Juggling all this work, school, the emotional labor of living under the same roof as my mother. She still asks for money sometimes, though she phrases it like a joke. Now, if I were to borrow a teeny tiny 20 quid, followed by a strained laugh that doesn't quite reach her eyes, I've started pretending I'm broke. I lie about my savings. I invent imaginary bills and make up fake court fees. Told her recently I was about to lose a small inheritance because of a legal technicality, just to explain why I was tightening my budget. It worked. She backed off, at least for now, but it kills me, the lying. I don't like who I've become. Around her, secretive, distant, calculating. I never wanted to be this way. I just didn't have another choice. My therapist says it's okay to lie to protect your peace. That not every truth is owed especially to someone who's used your honesty against you. That gave me comfort for a while, but it doesn't make it easier. Some mornings I wake up and feel like a fraud. I remind myself constantly, this is temporary. This is not who I am. This is who I have to be to get out. The pressure doesn't just come from my mom. My sister and her boyfriend live in the same house, and their presence adds another layer of tension. We don't speak much. There's still too much unspoken, too much history. I don't trust her, and I think she knows that, but she keeps her distance, maybe out of guilt, maybe because she knows I'm watching. There are days when the house feels like a bomb ticking quietly in the background. One wrong word and someone explodes. I do everything I can to avoid those moments. I keep to myself. Wear headphones, work in cafes, spend my evenings studying or watching shows with my door shut. I've created my own little bubble of peace, but it's flimsy, one confrontation away from popping. I sometimes imagine the day I'll leave. What I'll say, whether I'll pack at night or during the day, whether I'll leave a note or say it to her face. I fantasize about closing the door behind me and never looking back. It's not just about the house. It's about the years of damage that have led to this moment. The constant guilt tripping, the manipulation, the feeling that I'm responsible for everyone else's mistakes. I'm so tired of being the mature one, the fixer, the buffer between crisis and consequence. I want to be selfish. I want to have a life that doesn't revolve around cleaning up someone else's mess. I want quiet mornings, real independence. A place that feels like mine. I've done everything right, or tried to. I've worked hard, paid my dues, forgiven more than I should have. And still, I feel like I'm climbing out of a hole I didn't dig, but I'm close. I can feel it. The job offer could come any week now. The property my family fought over is on the market, and when it sells, I'll have a small windfall. Not a fortune, but enough to start again. Enough to build something better. Until then, I survive. The morning I left, I didn't say goodbye. I had rehearsed what I might say, something honest, but calm, something that might bring closure. But in the end, I realized closure with someone like my mother was never going to come in the form of a conversation. It was going to come the moment I closed the front door behind me and didn't look back. It happened faster than I thought it would. My job offer became permanent. No probation period, no complications, just a signed contract, a new title, and a start date. It should have felt like a celebration, and it did, for a moment, but mostly it felt like relief. Like I had finally pulled myself up out of the quicksand. The flat came next, a tiny one-bedroom, barely furnished, and definitely overpriced. But it was mine. No shared keys, no guilt-ridden rent transactions, no passive-aggressive silence over dinner, just quiet, just space. I packed everything slowly, quietly, methodically. I did it mostly at night, one box at a time, because I didn't want questions. And in truth, I didn't want a confrontation. I wasn't strong enough for a dramatic goodbye, and honestly, I didn't think she deserved one. Over the years, I've given her every ounce of patience, forgiveness, and benefit of the doubt I had to give. This was the last thing I owed myself, an exit on my terms. I left her a note. A short one. Not angry, not cold, just factual. I told her I'd accepted a job closer to my office, that I needed to focus on building a future, and that I hoped she would take care of herself. I didn't offer my new address. I didn't include a phone number. She still has ways of contacting me, of course, but she won't find me unless I let her, and I won't, because I've finally chosen peace. The first few days in the new flat were surreal. I kept expecting someone to bang on the door, asking for money or yelling about bills. I couldn't shake the habit of checking over my shoulder when I transferred money from one account to another, as if I were doing something wrong by simply owning my own money. My body was still braced for conflict. Even though I was finally out of the war zone, I thought I'd cry. I didn't. Not at first. It wasn't until my first Saturday morning alone in the new place, sipping coffee on my mattress, because I hadn't bought a couch yet, that it hit me. The silence was so total, so unfamiliar, that it made me realize how much noise I'd learned to live with. Not just literal noise, but emotional static, the constant stress, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the emotional gymnastics of managing someone else's dysfunction. It was gone, and I cried. Not out of sadness, though there was some grief, I'll admit, but out of sheer release. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath until I finally exhaled. Of course, she tried to guilt me. The texts started a few days later. I can't believe you just left like that. I gave you a roof when no one else would. This is how you repay me. You've turned into a stranger. I didn't respond. My therapist had helped me write out a list of boundaries before I left. No emotional manipulation, no financial entanglement, no revisiting the past. And at the very top of that list, no response is a response. I deleted the messages. I blocked her number for a week. Eventually they stopped. It's not that I don't think about her. I do. Sometimes I wonder how she explains my absence to others, whether she twists it into another tale of betrayal or conveniently leaves out her part, but I no longer feel the need to defend myself. My life, my choices, my peace. Those are my truths now, and they're not up for debate. My relationship with my sister remains non-existent. I don't regret cutting her off. She made her choices, and I made mine. I won't open old wounds, just to keep up appearances. Some ties need to stay severed for healing to begin. My boyfriend helped me move in. He didn't say much while I unpacked, but the way he looked at me quietly, proud quietly, patient, meant everything. He's seen the toll this has taken on me. He's held me during panic attacks, listened to me rant and unravel, supported me when I doubted whether I was strong enough to leave. And now we're planning a future. A real one. One that isn't built on secrets or fear or obligation. One where I don't have to lie about my bank account or my inheritance. One where I can just be imperfect, independent, and finally free. Leaving my mother wasn't just about moving out. It was about reclaiming my identity. It was about saying, I am not your lifeline. I am not your scapegoat. I am not your second chance. I am my own person, and I deserve better.